Hello everybody and welcome again to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the machine that some of you may have seen around or actually used before. It is not a very scarce machine. You can certainly find it in the United States, although of course it's much more prominent in Europe. I'm talking about the Telefunken M15A tape recorder. That brand is much more known in Europe, where it was competing with the likes of Studer for quite some time. And of course in the US, Studer is much better known. But if you are a collector, then you would certainly have some interest in this particular machine. The parent company to Telefunken, it's been producing tape recorders for much longer than anybody else in the world. Buying this machine in the United States is fairly complicated. They come and they disappear from the marketplace. And of course, at the time when I decided I wanted one, there was none to be found locally in the States. So I naturally had to look at the European market. And I found this machine, which is in very good condition overall. And believe it or not, shipping cost was fairly reasonable. So I got it here, and of course I had to do some minor work, specifically changing line voltage setting on this machine, which is not all that complicated. But straight from the start, this machine has developed or displayed some issues. One, it would blow the fuse after a couple minutes of operation, and it would do it again after you replace the fuse. So something was clearly not right there. It turned out it was the line filter shorting line from time to time. And basically the simplest remedy was simply to remove that line filter, and the machine will work fine without it. The second issue was the tape counter. And based on some feedback on the internet and whatnot, that seemed to be a fairly common issue with this particular model. So the counter would simply not move. It would sit at 0 and not making any progress. The circuit for the counter is fairly complicated, so before going that far, I would recommend to somebody who encounters the same problem to replace the optical sensor. That's what I did. I didn't know the model number for the original sensor, but I looked at shape, and I ordered online part that looked very much similar in terms of its physical dimensions and basic pinout. And as soon as I replaced that part, the counter started working. After that, the machine started working very reliably, and it's been quite fine since then. Now, the first thing you notice about this machine when you unpack it is that in terms of finish, it is not Studer. When you look at Studer, you see very high quality brushed aluminum everywhere. It's a very high level finish. Not so on Telefunken. It is very much industrial. As you can see here, a lot of the parts are covered by hammer enamel, which is okay for most industrial application. But strictly speaking, in your high-end environment, you would really like something different. Okay, so there is nice, well-finished panel in the front, so it helps to some degree. But overall, it is a machine that looks much more brutal, much more to the point than the Studer is. In terms of basic features of this machine, It is a two-speed machine with 7.5 and 15 inches per second, which is a big disappointment to me because in a machine of this size, I would kind of expect 30 inches per second. Of course, it is two-track, which is good. The basic architecture of this machine is not very common for the high-end studio machines, which normally use direct drive capstan. This machine uses belt-driven capstan. And that is something actually I like. You know, there is big discussion and big argument about benefits and drawbacks of particular architectures. But certainly belt drive has some attractiveness. You know, every motor has some torque ripple to it. And in direct drive system, that ripple stays very much there, while in a belt-driven system, it gets reduced to some degree by the belt. Other features of this machine are not very common in the US. For example, the German tape layout. As you can see, the tape enters the head block with its oxide level facing out. That's different from the most standard international layout. And another interesting feature is mechanical tension control. On both supply and take-up side, there are levers that allow you to set the torque. And amazingly, the system works very, very well. Another feature sorely missing on this machine is any kind of search. It doesn't have even the most primitive return to zero function. I find it very unfortunate. On the other hand, this particular element, the splicing block on this machine, is simply one of the best you can see in the industry. I loved using this block. It's so convenient. This angle makes it so ergonomic. The cutter, the size of the grooves, everything is just about perfect. Small feature, but it is an important feature if you do some editing. The way this machine arrived to me was just like that, with two platters for pancake operation. And here you see more or less traditional lock system. And the pancakes themselves are of good quality. They have nice machined or stamped lock on bottom that engages the pins. Is a real table, and you're ready to go. If you would like to use the Trident-based reels, you can buy these particular accessories. You remove those locks and you screw in the Tridents, and you're ready to go. It is a good solution. I don't mind it very much, but I think I prefer my own one. The shafts have M4 female thread in them. So what I do is simply take the thumb screw with the washer and put it in here. I then mount it on the shaft and screw it in, and this way I get very, very tight engagement, no wobbling, no nothing. It's very secure and stays very well in place. If you look at the size of this machine, one of the natural questions you have is why is it not taking 14-inch reels? Certainly moving the table slightly outside would have allowed you to do that. As it is, it can take up to 12.5, a little bit more maybe. So reels of 12.5 size will fit nicely. But what happens if you try to use larger platters, larger pancakes? The original ones, as you can see, they leave plenty of gap in the middle. So the question is, why not put larger ones in place? And that's exactly what I did. So I machined my own platters. It was not a very complicated job. And they work very well. And as you can see, they're quite a bit larger than the original ones. What's a big deal, you might ask? Well, it's not such a big deal, but the platters like this allow you to use large pancakes. And those pancakes are good for 50 minutes of music. You can actually use even larger ones, but 50 minutes is probably the largest standard pancake you can buy. So here you can see those custom-made platters and 50-minute pancake on top of one of them. As you can see, you can even go higher. And I've gone 60 minutes very easily by splicing some tape together. Of course, I mean the play time at 15 inches per second. And how important is this feature to you? You decide. Certainly some albums have play time much longer than 35 or 40 minutes. So in this case, it's nice to have longer tape and the ability to play it. Now let's see what we can find a little bit below the deck. Number one, there is an electronic bay where you have all the boards required for normal two-channel operation. And you also can see very large open space on the right. And I believe one company actually made the product. It's a tube-based playback preamp that can fit into this cavity. I think it must be a fairly compact tube circuit, but nonetheless, it's available. You can also see very large flywheel, belt-driven. The playback electronics is of very good quality. And one feature I like is that when you do EQ control and adjustment, you have two high-frequency trim pots. One adjusts, I would say, middle high frequency, and the other one adjusts very high frequency. And the result is very, very good adjustment you can make. It's probably best adjustment of all machines that I have in terms of simplicity and the quality. So here we have actual frequency response obtained from this particular machine, playing 15 inches per second. And if you know how those curves normally look, it is one of the best I have ever seen. It is very flat, very well controlled response. Another thing you will notice here is those connectors. They are not standard XLR connectors that you normally see on the machines. They're different ones. They're made by a company called Tuchel, if I pronounce it right. And as you can see, they're much more substantial in size and in size of the contacts than typical XLR connectors. And many people feel these are much, much better parts. Now, what do we do if you still would like to connect XLR-based cables to this machine? And the answer is you just make adapter cables. Another question is, like so many other machines in this class, this one doesn't have meters or bridge or adjustments and switches. What do you do? In this particular case, when you like to do the recording, you can use those adjustable attenuators. They're very high quality stepped attenuators. They will take XLR inputs and convert it to this particular brand of connectors for the machine to be used. And as far as the output calibration, this machine is simply calibrated using standard tape, so you don't have to worry about the levels at the output. So overall, how do I feel about this machine and its features? It's a good machine. It's probably not going to be your only machine if you're only supposed to have one. There are some much more versatile, more convenient machines. Certainly lack of surge speed and lack of surge capability are significant problems to me. But as one of the machines in your park, it makes perfect sense. It is a very interesting piece of gear. And I simply recommend to consider it, at least to consider it. Maybe not buy it outright, but certainly look at it, study its features, its history, its operation, and perhaps procure one. When you load the tape on this machine, remember to twist it in two places. So hopefully I spurred some interest in this machine in you. And if you have any other questions, please feel free asking them. And let's play some music now. Thank you again for watching. I hope you liked what you see about this machine. It got some shortcomings for sure. Yeah, lack of 14-inch reels and 3 speeds and search facility is something to be considered. But overall, it's an interesting piece of machinery that certainly can take good place in your collection. Thank you very much, and please stay well.